Welcome to the Games PR Podcast, your regular dose of video game PR goodness. Sit down, relax, as our team of experts and special guests share tips and tricks to help you level up your PR game with media and influencers.
You are listening to the Games PR Podcast, and we welcome you into this episode all about pitching. Whether you are a rookie or a Major League veteran, grab a Gatorade, other sports drinks are available, and take a break while we open up the playbook and talk all about pitching. From hyping up a game release to consumer media to unveiling a brand partnership, pitching is essential to the PR and marketing mix. So happy to be joined today by some pitching superstars here at Big Games Machine in the form of Tom, Luke and Keaiana to head out onto the mound in the great podcast ballpark. Hello everyone. Any baseball fans among us, or have I thrown a curveball here with all the references?
I know nothing about baseball. So
I
know cricket, the superior version of a ball and bat-based sport.
Yeah, I've got no time on my hands to watch baseball, to be fair. Spending 4 hours in the park just watching people throw a ball at someone, that's not for me.
Says the man who loves watching people kick a ball at each other.
Oh, that's entirely different. That's entirely different.
20 minutes as well. It's not over like 4 hours, is it?
Yeah, true.
Well, baseball puns aside, I'm sure there might be a few more during this as it's all about pitching. But yes, hello Luke, hello Keaiana. You guys are across B2B, which we'll kind of dive into a little bit later as we talk about B2C versus B2B and the different intricacies of what's involved with both. So hello both, welcome on for your pod debuts.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us.
Excellent. Well, we got a lot to dive into today. Pitching. We've alluded to B2B. I think this question is going to be for you first off, Keaiana. What is B2B, and does B2B have to be boring? Because that is the perception of it.
B2B is basically business to business. So our main role, job and function is to show off our clients what they offer, what they give, and hopefully get, other people interested in them as well. I personally don't think it's boring. I think firstly, we've got really cool clients who do really cool things. You get to know the team, you get to know what they do, what tech they have, how they're doing it. And I think it's just really cool to find fun ways to kind of get them an interview opportunity or get them a piece of coverage in an outlet, something that's like very, relevant to the industry. And finding fun ways to kind of get that done and fun ways to like of having a byline or something is really creative in a way. So I don't think it's boring. I'm a bit defensive there. It's not boring.
Do you think people just hear the word business and then they're just like falling asleep?
Yeah, I think it's because people think it restricts you, and I also think people think that it becomes salesy. You're trying to like get someone else to be a client of the client that you're representing. So then it's like, oh, come and buy this product or do this. And I really just don't think it's like that. I think it's more creating awareness, and it's a more subtle way of being like, how cool are these guys? And it's like putting the message out there that you really want to work with them because they're doing something really cool. So not salesy, not annoying, but just really fun.
I just want to add, I think the difference between B2C and B2B is that we're telling a story over a longer time. So obviously B2C can be a shorter campaign, it can be fast hits. Whereas B2B, you actually get into the personality and, do you know what I mean, the people that actually make the business. And I think that's one thing that we've seen in our clients is that we've got to know them, we've got to know their industry, and we're actually impacting and showing that we add value to the industry. So for me, that's what business to business is building that long-term strategy, just so we can actually tell the story of the people that of our clients then.
It's interesting you bring up that longer story, because for people who maybe haven't done any B2B pitching before or thought about that in their strategy because they are from the classic, okay, here's our game, we need to get it out there, and they haven't realized actually maybe they need to be pitching for investment. Go listen to our investing episode for some more topics about that. do you think that because there are similarities, if people are comfortable having pitched to B2C media, they can still take some aspects from that and apply that to B2B? What works and doesn't work? And maybe it's good to use an example, to name names specifically, but for someone who might not know what they might have to pitch, something common you see in terms of B2B, maybe investment or like funding round, something you see a fair bit and go, okay, this is a really easy way of explaining to someone what this story is. Because from an outsider, they might go, oh, investment sounds really scary. I need to add in a lot of complicated language here that I'm a games developer. I don't know all this. How do I overcome that easily?
Well, I think relevancy is obviously the thing that we deal in. And I think that is our community, is that being relevant and being up to date with sort of industry ongoing. So say, for example, if they do have a funding announcement, where does that fit into the ecosystem of PR? Like, where does that fit into the media? And like, what types of media are you actually going to pitch to? Like, we've all got to identify the different media groups, haven't we? And I think having that relevancy and putting your story into the grand scheme of things is ultimately the main way to do it. You said about like the jargon. I think a lot of jargon in B2B is not for us. So we go a different way. We try to keep things as simple as possible, just so the message doesn't get sort of convoluted. And I think that's an important lesson. And that was one of the biggest lessons I learned from coming into PR from university, for example. So I come in with all this jargon and all this spiel about, do you know what I mean, all these big words. And I realized that the journalist isn't going to actually pay attention to that. They only want to know why it's important, or say, for example, like, what are they going to do with that funding? And I think it's adding to that story and developing that story and saying why as opposed to just the general thing.
I'm glad you bring up the jargon point there, because I think it is really important, regardless of the product or whether it is B2B or B2C. But yeah, keeping it simple so you don't get confused. Have there ever been times where you've sat down and you've looked at the kind of briefing you've got and be like, there is no story here? Because that's a risk. I feel some people might just want to put the product out there for the sake of it without there really being a story behind it. How do you get around that? Do you have to create a story out of nothing?
Yeah, I think that's certainly an aspect of B2B, but there's always stories there, and obviously that is our job, is to develop that story, whether that's into a byline. Obviously, a lot of companies do want to just do a product release when they're not actually announcing anything. But how do we make it so that there is actually something to announce? Do you know what I mean? So whether that's, say, announcing AI, for example. So everyone wants to do that, but what is the difference? Like, what is that company going to bring to the table? And then we can obviously add that into either a media opportunity, a byline, put them into a podcast. So they're actually adding value to the conversation and not just shouting in their own echo chamber. So like a lot of business to business, I'd say naturally, seems like it's people just self-promotional and just adding nothing to the conversation. Whereas our job is to weave that message in and actually show that, well, yeah, this announcement will mean this in the future. So I think we had a Web3 client where they're on about democratizing Web3, democratizing gaming through Web3. Well, it's a big statement to make. So let's add the little product announcements along the journey. And I think that's one thing that obviously I've alluded to already. But it's building that brand story, building up and just actually going, right, this announcement might not mean anything singularly, but overall, over a longer period of time, it fits into the ecosystem, it fits into the conversation around what we want to actually announce.
I think that's really important as well, because with things like Web3 and AI, depending on your angle of doing it, some journalists will be like, that's played out, that's done. Like Web3 is massively dying down as a topic at the moment. There's only a few like niche people that are really kind of still super into it. So that's another like kind of, like bomb to avoid. You want to kind of position it and articulate it to be like, this is, I know it's oversaturated talking about AI right now, we're oversaturated talking about this and that, but this is why it's relevant, and this is why like you need to pay attention to what we're saying.
Is that something that then also means that in some cases you don't just have, like, in terms of the media you're approaching, it can be sometimes you go very specific with who you're contacting,
Yeah.
because that relevancy doesn't just come through the product, it also comes with the people that you're speaking to. Whereas I guess from our perspective, it's a lot more, obviously we have like different platforms and certain sites cover different platforms, but it's a lot wider. You're working with a much wider base, whereas so sometimes with how your pitching works, it's very specific to maybe even like one or two outlets, because that's where the relevancy is.
That's 100% it. It's the press list part of it, I'll be very honest, is like my least favorite part of it completely. Just because it's just, you rely on, like, obviously we use like Meltwater and things like that, but it's really, you have to do a lot of research to make sure that whoever you're contacting is relevant and will be interested. And even then, journalists are so busy and they get so many stories that you have to be so specific, and sometimes you don't get it 100% right. It's very much like trial and error. And sometimes the people like in the outlet that you might specifically want, they might not have that like specific person that you do also want to like contact and get you in that niche. So yeah, you do have to be very targeted, and you kind of have slim pickings depending on what you're pitching out.
So being approachable then is obviously really key, and you've spoken about just needing to match it up to certain people, and we agree that's something we see on B2C. So what are some key tips if someone is going to be B2B pitching for the first time? Just really key things you think they should consider, whether that's a certain type of subject line, whether it's just the way they present an email signature, because there's a lot involved.
When I first joined BGM, I was so scared of pitching, just because I was like, oh no, I don't want people to like ignore me. And Matt was like, don't overthink it. Like, honestly, you're fine. And he said, just like think about it as if you're like talking to your friend in a pub and you're telling them about what you're doing at work, and you really want to make it sound interesting and you really want to make it sound cool. And it's kind of like a colloquial, like way more informal conversation. I think that really helped me kind of set in to like how to approach it and how to like pitch it. So I was like, hi sir, like, how are you doing today? Like, super formal. People aren't going to be interested in that. They're going to be like, oh, blah. So I think being really friendly, but not too like, oh my God, I really, really want your attention and time. But like, let the pitch speak for itself, essentially.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to go with a football analogy, but I think it's like being a striker up front. Do you know what I mean? Where you're going to have all these opportunities. You know there's the perfect time to shoot, but sometimes you do miss. But it's having that resilience and that building of character to go, well, I was in the right position there. I was right to shoot, but it wasn't the opportune time. So next time I'm going to score. And I think it's having that sort of resilience. And moving on from that, then, in terms that you said about the characteristics you need, I think being personable and actually speaking to people like people. Well, I mean, like we mentioned the jargon earlier. When you're throwing all these complicated terms in and not actually speaking as you would normally, well, a lot of journalists is just going to, do you know what I mean, rubbish it away and go, actually, I'm not reading that. There's too many words. So I like to keep it short, concise, and actually to the point. And I think a lot of journalists actually appreciate that, because obviously we know from our survey that a lot of people are under pressure. Do you know what I mean? They haven't got enough time, they're underpaid, and obviously we need to keep it concise and actually show, well, this is the message we want to portray. Are you interested, effectively? And I think keeping it short, sweet, and personable, speaking to them like you are a person and there is another person on the other end. And I think, like with Gmail, obviously we use Gmail, having a picture just to show, well, look, there is someone on the other side. It's not just this random thing or this random AI doing it. It's actually us, and we're actually people. And I think in the generation of AI, that personability is becoming more important.
Yeah, I think at least from our side on consumer, everyone tends to have a certain style of pitching they find works for them, and it does benefit obviously having those relationships with journalists that they know to look out for your emails. But maybe Tom, you can shed some insight on this aspect, because we've already mentioned jargon before, and there are similar things on consumer. We know media know what to look out for. They can smell when someone says like revolutionary controls. It's probably not revolutionary. So
The way
I
I
know,
always, the
yeah,
way I view it, and I think this from, applies across the board of however you pitch, is that I haven't got any specifics in my mind, but I think, sometimes we all see a post on LinkedIn or an article and you read it and you just think, this is just a load of nonsense. Like, nothing's being said here. It's just a load of buzzwords that are aimed at, like this business mentality, about the grind and blah, blah, blah. And I think for me, that just completely switches me off from stuff. I stop reading the actual message because I just focus on the silly words that are being used. And I think what you were saying, Luke, about being, personable is really important. And I think that the way you've both spoken, I think I'm definitely understanding that excitement is really important when you're pitching to people. And that doesn't come at the cost of professionalism, and it is important to come across in a professional capacity, but it's also important to, whether you are pitching something on the B2B side, or you've got a game that you're looking to get a journalist, interested in, you have to let that excitement through. And I think the way that you do that is by, being how you are. Like Jack was saying, I think we all pitch in different ways. There's certain ways that I pitch. There's certain, styles of writing, or, we quite enjoy sometimes metaphorically letting our hair down. And, having, if we've got a game that's all about space, we use lots of space puns, or if it's got a really strong theme, we play into that, because I think you've got to keep things compact, but you also, you can have a little bit of fun with it, and you try different things to try and stand out. But yeah, I think that the number one thing is really being, we're all people. And I think letting that come across, and letting that, belief in the product and the belief in the game come across is super important. You don't want to be impersonal. You don't want it to be like, oh, we have this. This is what this does. Because that's not interesting. I don't think that's interesting. When I was on the journalist side of things, that always, I just thought, it's just another pitch. For me, it's like they're trying to sell me something, but I'm not the person they need to sell it to. I'm the person who they want to play it, to then tell people about it, which I think is a really big difference. And I think it's the same for you guys. It's just in a slightly different way. You're not, ultimately, we are trying to like help move a product or a game along, but the people we're speaking to are the people who are looking to buy it. They're the people who we want to work with, to collaborate with, to push this message forward. And I think that's always in my mind, is that I'm not trying to sell this to you. I'm just trying to give you the idea of what's going on, try and get you interested in it, so then you can invest the time, and then they're the people who are working with the consumers or the other businesses in that kind of way. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, I think it's tricky. It's different every time, but I think there are certain things which you can definitely push along to be successful. And I think, yeah, be a person, actually communicate with people like a human. We do appreciate it. We appreciate it when it comes back to us. So that to me is the number one rule.
But I
I'll
think,
hand it back to you now, Jack, to Luke.
what you said about being that personal, but one of the biggest things I'd like to say I've got a skill in is empathy, and like actually showing empathy towards the journalist, showing empathy towards the client, and then showing empathy to the stakeholders. Obviously, in each announcement, in each pitch that we do, we're trying to portray something. Well, what are we trying to get at? And I think it's trying to fit all three there into, right, this is the message that I'm trying to portray. How can I be empathetic to each party and actually put a pitch that will fund each party and will actually show that each party's, I actually care about them. And I think where, Tom, you mentioned the ideas part of it. That's all pitching is developing ideas for clients and developing ideas for journalists. And I think that's a skill that's probably undervalued, underappreciated, is that we're selling ideas effectively, and we've got to be curious. We've got to research our topics and actually understand where it fits into. I've mentioned ecosystem, and a little bit scared that it's going to go into jargon. Sorry, but yeah, where it does fit into the ecosystem and where we actually contribute to the conversation.
I think
it's going to
interesting what you.
sound an obvious question here, but how important is it that you understand the project that you are pitching? Because there might be all the official text, the selling points you have to get across, but then if somebody comes back with a specific question, you obviously need to be in a point of expertise to answer that. So, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, go on, jump in.
It's important to like completely understand what your purpose is of the pitch, because then that conveys into your confidence when you're writing it, when you're speaking about it. So when they do come back, you can confidently just reply and sound assertive and sound, because then it's like, okay, well, you sound sure about it, so that makes me want to be sure about it. Do you know? If you have that like little bit of hesitance, then they're going to be like, I don't know if it's worth it.
I think that part of that confidence also comes through the understanding of what the client wants. And I can think from our side of things, that's, we'll sit down, we'll, get a chance to play the game, look at the like written materials around it, and really get that understanding of the way our clients want to present it. And then that informs us how we pitch, how we write the press releases, because ultimately I'm not representing my own interests. I'm not representing my own opinions. I'm trying to help our client get, their perception of things across. And I can imagine that's the same, on the other side of things. And it is that I think if you having that understanding, and especially if it's something you're working on that's your own product, well, that's great, because I'd like to hope you have that understanding of what you're doing, of what your own thing is. But I think in every way, make sure that you have that understanding of not only how you perceive the product of the game, but also the way the client sees it. Because then that can inform you along the whole way. And it's like what you were saying before, Keaiana, about having that knowledge to be able to then go back to people. If you do that, you can have the confidence in yourself. You won't be second guessing yourself, because you know the product inside and out. You know what your client wants. You know the story that they want to tell. You know what the message is. So doing that homework is so important. There you go. Take the floor. Take the microphone.
I'm gonna say, like, I think that's why I love client calls so much, because like I love like that FaceTime with the client, and I love like kind of figuring out what they're like and how they speak about their brand, their business, what's going on, because then you kind of get an idea of how they want it to be presented, and what their vibe is overall, and then you can kind of like just feed that through a little bit and give it some of their personality as well, because obviously we're individuals like pitching and kind of understanding and believing and like not regurgitating, but putting it forward. And so it's like very individual essentially, because that's your voice and what you're carrying on. But when you, like you said, like understanding what the client wants and things like that, you can incorporate that into it as well, so they get more of an idea of what you're also talking about and who you're talking about.
And I'm going to use a niche reference here, but I think we're the water carriers of businesses. So, if you look at Didier Deschamps, he was always known as being the water carrier. So he was never you wouldn't think of him when you come to France '98 as the most important player of the team, but he's the one that gets things ticking over. And to be a more recent example, someone like Busquets, is that he is the brain in there, and he's carrying that message. He's the one that sets the tempo. He's the one that sets the standard. And I think that's what we do as PRs. And sorry to be very specific, but yeah, that's the way I put it.
I'll be a coffee carrier. Can I be a coffee carrier instead? I'll be the coffee carrier. Just bringing the coffees in.
It's an excellent point I wanted to raise, is playing devil's advocate here. If somebody is thinking, well, it's my product, of course I know it inside and out. Why do I need to hire someone else in order to tell the story of my product? I think you touched on some points there. It's the time involved, it's the relationships with the journalists, and it's being able to distill those points and tell that story in a more streamlined way, because we see it from consumer side, especially, somebody might never have been able to play test their game. They are the only ones who've been able to give feedback on their own game. Of course, they're going to think their game is the best thing. And then it can be a real eye opener when media take a look and go, well, actually, I'm not seeing any of these points. And so having a PR strategy in place, regardless, if you could still do it yourself, but just having some other people get some eyes on it to help you tell that story just may open up some different angles you didn't see before. I'm sure, like you said, with those client face-to-faces, there's been times where you've actually gone, hey, there's an angle here. Have you thought of that? Because creativity is one of the best things to come out of PR when you can do it.
We're always consuming the news. Like, we're always consuming what's going on and how journalists are covering things. Obviously, we're across a wide scope of publication. So when we see, or when we're speaking to clients, we're actually going, well, that would be a perfect fit here if we could just develop a story and actually add facts and figures. And again, that we could add to that. And I think we've got that breadth of knowledge, and that's why I think that's why it's so important just to have that FaceTime and actually to understand what they want and what the journalists want, and we're just literally just a matchmaker in between.
And I love it when the clients are actually really excited and really open to what you have to say as well. I don't like it when, obviously, the client knows best, full stop, essentially. So sometimes if you're like feeding through ideas or information and they're just like a little bit resistant or reluctant, I think on our side that can be like a little bit frustrating, because, and it's like, even if you don't think that our idea is like amazing, having that conversation and our clients like super open and super excited, and like we like are able to kind of bounce ideas off each other, I really enjoy that as well, because it's like we are different worlds, and you may not. So since I joined PR though, I am surprised sometimes that some clients I feel like don't really know what we do, or like, or they do.
That's
know
why
what
these
we do, but,
podcasts
like, don't
exist.
understand.
That's why these podcasts exist.
Yeah.
Like, this is what we do. Look,
Yeah.
listen to what we say. This is what we actually do.
I love it when like they're just really open and they're like, they trust us. That's it. I love it when they trust us to do what they want us to do. I feel like it makes the process so much easier, and it enables you to put way more, like oomph into your pitch and into what you're doing, because it's like, you've worked together to tailor this idea and you're both excited about it and you want to just get the best results, really.
That's why pitching is so
wonder-
important, because it is if you got like a triangle, if like every client is like a triangle, the pitching is often that thing right at the top. That's all the planning and the conversations and the brainstorming and all these ideas come together, and they end with that pitch. And then that's the point where that's like the first contact between humans and aliens. Like, this is the moment. That's the moment that's the exciting bit, and it's exciting. It's nervous. I always have a little, even though it's been like 2 years now, I always get nervous when there's a little bit of nerves when we're doing pitching, because it's like, it's this really important moment. But I think, it's just exactly. And I guess there's definitely, there's what you were saying before, Luke, about about us being in that position of keeping track of things. We have a really good newsletter that every day, it's a compact way for us to see, oh, these are all the bits that are going on. And we'll, make sure we'll have a link to that in the description of the podcast. So go and have a look at the newsletter, because it's very good. But not to shill the newsletter, but the point I was going to make was that, we all, no matter which side of the business we're on, no matter what we're focusing on at certain times, we like to keep, ourselves very in tune of everything that's going on. And that is something that informs the pitch. It informs, from our perspective, when we're pitching something out, it's often, a smaller product, and we're trying to get those eyes on it. So it can be a case that we'll use the subject line to look at something that's really relevant at the moment. If there's a particular game that's trending, it might be something new, it might be something old that all of a sudden has had an explosion in popularity. But we'll use those opportunities and we'll use that knowledge that we have to then try and push the in our instance the game forward. And that's often an SEO play for us. It'll be about, you know, the current state of consumer games journalism is that it's very SEO focused. So in our heads, when we're pitching, when we're writing press releases, when we're writing subject lines or looking to place interviews or anything like that, one of our most important focuses in our mind is, okay, if we're speaking to an editor, a guides writer, a journalist, an interviewer, what can we do to make this a more SEO friendly package? And that's something that it goes against a lot of things that I like, because I'm very much a fan of, the anti-SEO model, but it's the reality. And that's something that we 100% lean into because it's effective. And it can often be saying, this game and this game are quite similar to this that we're presenting to you now. And that's something that then an editor might be scrolling through the 100 and 200 emails that they get every day, and they say, oh, that's interesting, because we know that's a popular one. We know that our readers like that content about that game, so let's see what it is. And I think it's that knowledge that we bring to the table which can sometimes push things over the line. It's tricky, but it's one of those ways that we try to do that.
How do you feel about subject lines? Because you mentioned it like a few times. They are important, but like getting the right one is just such a headache. So how do you feel about it? Like, what's like
on B2C, at least, we've heard from journalists at larger publications go, can you include like a relevant topic or trending game in that subject line that helps contextualize it for them? And because SEO is a massive driver, it means that it gives them a kind of excuse to cover the game, especially for indie titles. It's a struggle and they are taking a risk on an unknown title at the point. So if we can link it to a trending game, then it just helps the media go, okay, yeah, I can cover that and include that game in there and give it some SEO value. It can be tricky. The niche of the game, the more stretched and vague you have to make the connections, but it's good fun. And I think it again shows the value we offer clients in that they can absolutely develop a game probably way better than I could, but it's then my job in order to tell that story to journalists and go, okay, if you want to talk about this style of game, this is how we can bring it relevant to FIFA when that releases in a couple of weeks, that kind of thing, or EAFC as we say now. So for us, subject lines are contextual for not too long, but sometimes if you go really wacky with it might need to be quite long. One of my favorite ones I did a pitch as a whole was a game. It's a sci-fi game set in space. I go, okay, there's loads of these. There are going to be too many games that I can link it to. How do I make this stand out further? And so it was, okay, I know done my research. I know the journalist is a massive Red Velvet fan, K-pop group, as am I. So I was like, right, I can guarantee they're not getting any pitches like this week. This is how I'm going to stand out. I did our whole pitch on the game based using song titles to craft the pitch. And that was my connection, was not to a game, but to a different topic that only the journalist was into. The journalists loved it. They went out of their way to reply with a similar structured email. It doesn't mean you should be crafting a pitch based only on the journalist's music preferences, even if they do have amazing taste and stand Red Velvet. So just be natural, take it slow, don't be dumb. I've done it again with the references. But that's an easy way of, that could have just been a context line of K-pop pitch below, something like that, and then just something different that they're seeing stand out compared to everything else in their inbox. So the long and short of it is we can have fun and we can be wacky within reason.
Well, I think that's a topic that we haven't really touched on yet is personalization. I think that is a big part of PR, and obviously it's a trending topic at the moment. But I just don't see why you wouldn't take your time just to develop the pitch to the person centric. So journalists know they can see a copy and paste from an absolute mile away. So just make sure to just take that time. It might be an extra 5 minutes, it might be an extra 20, but just knowing that right, this is the perfect fit, this is the perfect match for what I want to say. And look, just even small little details like just saying their name and actually into them directly. And like you said about the interest, it's great if you know that. But say if we don't have any information from social media, just have a look. What's their background? What do they actually cover on a day-to-day basis? Take that time, research, and actually personalize, because ultimately we've seen much better results from personalization, because that's, in my opinion, the only way to do it. And mass pitching is it's an outdated tactic that it just doesn't work anymore, in my opinion.
I think it also shows that like you've taken the time to get to know who they are, what they're doing, and what they're writing about. And obviously they're going to be very interested and passionate at what they're writing about. And there's also like we all have an ego, like there's a part of that as well, you know. It kind of plays into theirs slightly because you're like you sometimes I like to reference their article that's relevant to whatever I'm pitching. I'll be like, love how you spoke about da 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 da. Like this is also something we can carry through for like this person. So I'd love it if you'd sit down, da, da, da. And I think that's a really important thing to do. But I never used to like when I first came here. I was just like, I didn't want to personalize it because I didn't want to like overstep a line maybe or like be like too buddy and they'd be like, oh my god, who's this girl? Like, chill out. Do you know what I mean? But it really does pay off, and like that's also again like Luke, you've definitely sat there and spoken to me about it. Matt again has been like so spot on, and so Charlie, just to really like kind of figure out how to personalize it but make it as natural as possible. If you can't find that common link or thread, then just don't force it. But if you can and you do your research and you know it's completely relevant, like smash it out. Definitely try and make them pay attention.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that there is a degree of, like you were saying, everyone loves being told about good stuff that they've done. And sometimes when I'm pitching to people, I'll do that, and it's because it's people whose content I genuinely like do enjoy, whether it's a podcast, just the way they like write articles or the things that they talk about, and or if it's just stuff that I am also interested in. I think 100% don't. I think you'd be wrong not to make use of that, and I think you'd be silly not to, because it's like you're saying, Keaiana, that's that link right there that you can make instantly, and you don't have to think about it from like a cold business point of view. I just think there's people who I email who I genuinely enjoy speaking to, and whether that's saying, oh, I just listened to the latest episode of the podcast, really good again, really enjoy it, and it helps, but it's also just another way to continue to build those relationships. And don't be afraid to do that. There's nothing wrong. We're allowed to, from a PR perspective, I think we're allowed to enjoy people's like coverage of things or content. There's no shame in that. And I don't think it has to have this like kind of untoward, like Disney villain-esque plot to it that, oh, I'm just using this as a way to get some coverage, because I think again that's just about being human. And if you, in any other capacity, if someone was doing something, or they were, if someone wrote a really good book and you liked it, you would, if you saw them or if you met them or if you had the chance to email them, you wouldn't be like, oh, I'm not going to mention this. I really love this person's book, but I'm not going to mention this because it would be rude to do so, or it would be wrong. Like, I just think, like, no, go for it. The worst, I cannot imagine someone coming back and being like, please don't tell me that you like my writing. Please don't say that. Let's just keep things professional. So yeah,
I think that's really important what you said for relationships. After you get what you want as well, essentially, well, that is not a good way to phrase that, but after maybe you get the coverage or you get the pickup, I love like going back to say thank you, like, and just being like, oh, because it's like, I don't actually need anything for you, but I'm very happy that you did that for me, and I want you to kind of know that I do appreciate your time and the fact that you picked it up and were interested in it. And I also aim to just like build that relationship, and kind of so I can go back to them in the future. But my favorite journalists are the ones that are kind of like super super standoffish, and they're like, yeah, no, or even like their happy mode is like saying like thank you or something. I love those like tough cookies to crack. It makes me feel real good when they've been cracked. You know what I always get nervous of? I love an exclamation mark. Like, I absolutely love an exclamation mark, and I'm very like, hey, like, have a great weekend, like. And I think, sometimes I might come off like a little bit too keen, but that's genuinely just like how I just like to, type type whatever I'm thinking. Um, so yeah, I always worry about that. It's a little irrelevant point.
I
For
think I think that is relevant though, because I think it comes back to what this whole episode has been about, and helping people figure out how to pitch. And I think it's you want to if this is something that you're only just starting to do for the first time, whoever it is that you're speaking to, whether you're focusing on more consumer media or more business media, I think that don't be afraid to have your own style. Definitely make sure that don't I hope that you could take lots of advice from this podcast. There's other content on the site that also goes into pitching, but just get a good idea of good practices, but don't be afraid to try things and make mistakes. I think sometimes when I'm pitching, I'll look at I can look back at older pitches now and think, wow, that was not a good pitch. But that's because I've learned how to be better at doing it, and that's natural. You're always gonna, if you look at things that you did 2 years ago, no matter what it is, you're probably better at them now if you keep doing them than you were. So I think it's important, don't fixate on the small things. Just make sure that you're doing the important things right. And like some of the things we've touched on, the idea of having that authentic voice, whether that's if you're working on your own product, making sure that you're getting the voice of your product over to people, the voice of your game. Those are that's the really important thing. There's different ways to do that, and don't be afraid to try different ways. I mean, even on the when we're doing a campaign and we're emailing people, we're pitching before embargoes lift, we're pitching when embargoes lift, we're following up after, whether we're it doesn't matter who we're speaking to. Sometimes even in the same phase of a set of follow-ups, I'll try different subject lines, I'll try different slightly different styles of pitching to people, because I think you can always you can learn from those things, you can try different things. I think just don't have that kind of cookie cutter approach either, of just this is how very robotic, this is how I'm supposed to pitch, I will not try anything else. Have fun with it. But yeah, you're gonna make mistakes. I think using exclamation marks isn't the worst thing in the world. What's James's rule? James has the rule of like, don't use 2 in a row. I think that's James's rule about exclamation marks.
I've definitely broken that rule multiple
Don't tell
times.
James. We're redacted. We'll cut this bit.
That doesn't make the edit.
Edit it out. I was like, no. But then I just realized that firstly, like, BGM trusts me to know what I'm doing. I should trust me to know what I'm doing, and to just, read it through. If I'm really unsure, send it to someone in the team. Everyone's super helpful. They'll give me honest feedback and opinions, and then just shoot it out. But the best pitches that I've sent, I think, are the ones where I've been like just confident of myself and been like, okay, cool. I know what I'm pitching. This is what we're doing. Going out with it. Fire. Go.
Find a happy place to pitch in. One of the things, if you ask Jack likes to work with he has this weird playlist of like war music, but there's like people talking. That's Jack's like happy place when he's working, and it's his happy place when he's pitching. I quite like to I've this week we've been working on a press release and then pitches for a game that's based in it's to do with kung fu, and it's based in like ancient China, and it's to do with like the idea of wuxia, which history lesson time, big history machine. So wuxia is it's a genre of fiction that's about martial heroes in China even, sorry. So while we've been doing that, I've been listening to like ancient Chinese music to really get me in that mind space. And I find that helps me. And that might be weird to some people, but it's about, when it comes to actually writing it, find a way which, get into that mode of writing, get into that focus. I like to, when I'm writing a pitch,
I'm just
I really
imagining
like to...
you like having a Master Sifu voice like in your head as
just
as
guiding me.
and going
But no, I
through
think
it.
that that helps me because it focuses me in on. I really like to, when I'm pitching, because I can be quite all over the place a lot of the time when I'm pitching or when I'm like writing my pitches and I'm emailing journalists. I really like to focus in on that. And if anyone wants to speak to me during that time, I don't like it. I really want to just focus. Give me a couple of hours to really go in, because that's like the execution point. That's the point where we're in the big leagues at that point. So I like to go into my own space, but that works for me. But it's what works for other people. When it comes to
I've done a pitch before, method acting like in character. Halloween, I had a American D-Day, Saving Private Ryan style uniform. That was the costume, and then we had a World War II game, and I was like, right, let me put my costume on, put the helmet on, get into character, and start writing the pitch. And
that is dedication. That is why you need the BGM team.
We don't have costumes. We don't have costumes for every pitch. Just to clarify, it's a treat. That's a treat if that comes out. Or if it's a football game, put on a football shirt. Maybe go in your garden and pretend to score some goals like you're a kid again. Yeah, have fun. I think that's the most when you're pitching across all. No matter who you're pitching to, no matter what. As I was saying, B2B, it's not boring. It's fun. Make sure you have fun. Make sure that the pitch is, has that excitement in it, has the belief in what you're pitching to people. Because if it doesn't, if you sound boring in a pitch, how do you think that reflects on what you're pitching? It sounds boring. It's not exciting. Look at you're just looking. Look at all the boring business jargon in that. How boring! I'm not clicking on the links to see what's going on. I don't care because it sounds boring. The way you sell the product is by having that excitement in it. Because if you don't come across as excited, then as a journalist, I'm just going to be like, next. Because they have plenty of choice, especially nowadays. There's always something. There's always something else. For us, there's so many games.
The ninth inning here, so we're going to have to start wrapping it up. Thank you, Tom, Luke, and Keaiana for joining me on this episode. Definitely feel like we've learned a lot. We didn't even get on to influencers. I think we'll revisit that topic another time, because pitching them is almost like a blend of B2B and B2C. So it would be great to get some insight in there. So yeah, thank you for joining. Everyone who's listening, please give it a subscribe if you haven't done so already, so you always have a ticket to the next game. You can find us at Big Games Machine on Twitter, or X, I guess, at the minute, plus biggamesmachine.com, which has our previous episodes as well as a load more content. Any final comments to wrap up, people? Any fast balls to wrap this inning up?
Thanks for having me. Thanks for caring about what I've got to say.
No, you two have been great. You've both proven that B2B is not boring, I think, and that's the most important thing of all. So
he
it's
froze,
been
but
fun
I'm guessing
to have
he's going
you
to say
both
fun. B2B is real fun.
That'll be a way to end the episode on just a massive cliffhanger like that. That's how we get listener retention, is end it on a cliffhanger, and then you got to listen to the next episode to find out what happens.
I had fun. I didn't think I was nervous.
It's nice. It's nice.
We are experts. We're just sharing our knowledge.
Yeah, it's nice to actually speak to the B2C team as well. Like, just understanding.
Yeah.
You always realise how many similarities we actually face. Like, we always feel like there's a massive difference, but again, we're just all fun, aren't we? Do you know what I mean? We all just love fun.
Yeah. Different, but we're the same. Excellent. Well, there we go. I've wrapped up. I've done the plugs. So thank you all. I think we'll end it here.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you on the next one.
Bye bye.
Bye.